Hello everybody, my name is Lopez. I was born and raised right here in Brownsville, Texas, and this is my neighborhood, Barrio Buena Vida, or La Buena Vida Housing Project. And I'm currently the principal for Idea College Prep Brownsville. What's the connection to the neighborhood? I was born in Brownsville, Texas, and my parents actually live less than a block away from this housing project. So I grew up here. 90% of my friends, if not all, most of my friends, or all of my friends actually lived in this neighborhood. And I went to school right across the street at Webb Elementary. And then even before I went to elementary school, I came to this building right here for a Head Start program before I started my kinder years, or kinder first and second, third grade years. And I came into this building right here. It's called the Myra Smith Head Start program. And I remember very distinctly coming in and going out through that door right there. And this whole building actually had a fence, and there was a play station right here, or a play yard right here, if you will, where I used to play. And I remember there was a gate at the end of that sidewalk right there where my parents used to drop me off and pick me up whenever it was that I came here. So I grew up here. So I have a couple of memories from the inside. I remember going in through here, and I remember eating breakfast in there. I remember them serving us lunch. Specifically, I remember lots of round tables on the inside and lots of playstations or workstations, if you will, where we had various different types of toys and puzzles, coloring books, colors, writing utensils, pencils, and I remember sleeping mats where we used to take naps. I remember our teachers, singing songs, children's songs. And I remember coming outside and playing out here. The inside was very, very confined. In hindsight, I know that now. The inside, we had everything in there. It was the cafeteria, it was the nap space, it was the play space, it was the work space. Everything was in there. I can't remember how many kids were in there, but I know there was quite a few of us. And it was a pretty cool time in my life. I remember that much. The buildings, so the question is how the whole neighborhood has changed. Actually, a lot of it is still very similar. In the last 40 years, these buildings actually look the same. They still have the same shape, same form. The only thing I think that has changed is the exterior, which is every few years it looks like they paint and renovate and do minor alterations around the buildings, but everything pretty much looks the same. Especially in this neighborhood. I think the main difference that I see is the traffic flow. And I know that sounds a little different maybe, but believe it or not, 14th Street, which is right in front of us, you actually used to lead straight into the International Bridge. And the expressway, one of the exits actually used to exit right here on 14th Street. And the expressway actually used to end right on International. So there was a lot of traffic through here. It may seem like there's a lot right now, but this is nothing compared to what it was 20 or 25 or 30 years ago. And that's the big difference that I see here is that the amount of pedestrians walking and or vehicles coming in and out of these roads is a lot less than what it was 20 or 30 years ago. And I think that has had some kind of like an economic impact in this area, because there used to be a lot of small restaurants, mom and pop shops. That dollar store used to be Lopez supermarket for the longest time. This whole area was flooded with car dealerships. And ever since it seems like they renovated the expressway, and the expressway now ends at another part of the city, it seems like the economics of this portion or this part of town have kind of decreased. But the area looks very much the same. I went to school here at Webb Elementary. Buildings are still the same, still has the same shape. Sidewalks, everything, the streets. Just a couple of the businesses that used to be here are no longer here. So there used to be two bakeries right there. One of them was called Matamoros Bakery, Panadería de Matamoros, or Panadería El Puerto, I'm sorry. It was owned by the Matamoros family. And that was 2 blocks down the road right here. And then another bakery used to be on that empty lot right there. Basically, I can't remember, that's Polk Street right there. And that actually used to belong to my grandparents. And so I grew up in that bakery when the building was there. There's still a little stair, like a stair step there where I used to go up and down. So I used to come to school here at Webb Elementary, and instead of walking home, I'd walk to the bakery so I can spend time with my grandmother and eat a lot of bread because it was coming out fresh from the ovens. And so So obviously those two businesses are gone, and then a little bit down the road there used to be a tortilleria, I think it's still there, but it's changed owners over the couple of years. Um, and then we used to have a restaurant right around the corner here. We used to have a taqueria, which we no longer have. My parents long since have closed it down, but that's where I grew up, working in our own restaurant on taqueria, which is right around the corner here. Absolutely. I mean, this neighborhood for me, obviously, it means the world to me. There's a lot of rich history here that it seems like only the local residents know, or people that grew up in this area know. Right down the road, we have El Cine Victoria, which I used to go to as a kid. Saturday matinees, we used to see like 3 movies for $1. And it was already an old theater when I was a kid. But when my mother and father were kids, that was the place to go. Supposedly it was a very, very special place to go. It was well kept. It was rather new, I guess, back in the 50s and 60s. And a lot of famous Mexican artists used to come to that theater, and it's right down the road. The building is still there anyway. It's not a theater anymore. But I remember going there as a kid, and they had this one section near the concession area where we used to buy our popcorn and candy and all that stuff, that had all the memorabilia from all these Mexican artists on a wall. And I remember seeing signed pictures and/or autographs and/or hats or belts or boots that these artists donated to the theater, because El Teatro Victoria was a place that these Mexican artists came to perform. And the one that stands out in my mind that I hope I'm remembering correctly was Pedro Infante. And Pedro Infante, if you don't know anything about him, he's like the equivalent of Elvis Presley in Mexico. He passed away a long time ago in an airplane accident, but during the 30s, 40s, and 50s, he was the universe for Mexico. And I think he came here because I remember seeing one of his mariachi hats in a case and his picture next to it. So either he came and visited or he came and performed there. And needless to say, that's a big thing. It's like having Elvis Presley visit a small, theater back then. And so there's a lot of little pockets of these kinds of things that are here in this neighborhood. Right down the road, we have Cummings Middle School, which I went to, or Cummings Junior High, what it was called back then. And then a lot of history, believe it or not, right along that fence, because that actually used to be the bus stop for us to go to Hanna High School. So if you can imagine 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th graders from this entire neighborhood lining up that fence, waiting for 3 buses to pick us up to take us to Hanna High School. So I can't remember what the pickup time was, 8:15, 8:30, 8:45 or something like that, so we can be at school by 9 or 9:30. I can't remember the times, but I can remember waiting here for the bus and all the joking around, all the goofing around, all the things that teenagers probably shouldn't be doing, were all the mischief that we could get into happened right there, actually. I used to walk from my house and just, every morning was a show, because every morning somebody was picking on somebody or joking about something or talking about what they did on the weekend or finding something to make fun of somebody else. It was always a laugh. Sometimes I was on the receiving end of those jokes, I'm not gonna lie. Here on Miraflores, when I was younger, probably in junior high, we used to play football in there. We would wait for all the cars to go by, and then we would play football, and we would make up the rules as we went along. Many times. I don't even know how we coordinated the games. Everybody just showed up and played. It's not like we said, hey, I'll see you there on Saturday at 8 a.m. or whatever. We would just let's play football, and somebody would take out our football and we'd start playing, and next thing you know, there's 20 or 30 guys in there playing football. Important events, I think the biggest one that comes to mind as far as an important event for me in my childhood in this neighborhood is, believe it or not, back in the early 80s, President Ronald Reagan visited Brownsville, Texas. And for me personally, I was going to Canales Elementary, which is a little bit down the road, down International Boulevard or 18th Street. And he was actually going to speak here at the local university, which back then was either Texas Alamos College or the Convention Center. I can't remember which venue he was going to speak at, but he was going to speak right here, right on the border. And so there was this big ramp up for it. For maybe a week before he came to town, we were creating all these signs so that we can put along the fence, because Canales Elementary is right on International Boulevard. So it's very similar to Webb Elementary, where this is 14th Street and the fence is right next to 14th Street. And so the whole school basically lined up along the fence waiting for President Reagan to drive by as he was going towards the convention center or to TSC to speak. And we were out there. I was a kid back then, so for me it seemed like forever, but maybe it was only 10 or 15 minutes. I remember it was a really, really sunny day, and I remember it was during the school day. So remember we were happy because we got out of class and we were out, but then I remember us being very frustrated because it seemed like the president never came, the motorcade. But I remember the whole street was blocked off. There was policemen everywhere, and everybody was lining up on the sides of the street. I remember seeing people on the other side of the street coming out of their homes so that they can see the president's motorcade. It almost looked like a parade. And we had either little flags or signs that we would wave. And we were waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting. And then all of a sudden, here comes the motorcade. And I remember specifically the big black limousine, the President of the United States vehicle, his limo, drives right in front of us. And I could clearly see President Reagan through the tinted windows. And he was waving at us. You know, obviously he was being very presidential. He was waving at us, and I remember that made a big imprint in my mind, because I was like, you know, probably in 4th or 5th grade, and I get to say that the president waved at me. There was a little moment there where I think he looked at me, right? But he probably didn't. But anyway, so he drove by, motorcade. There must have been hundreds of police officers, Secret Service, police officers and motorcycles. And it was all for one man that was going to speak here in Brownsville, and this man happened to be, you know, the most powerful man in the world, the President of the United States. So I remember that. I can't remember the year, but it had to have been somewhere 1984, 83, 85, somewhere in there. I was not in junior high yet. I was still in elementary, but I was no longer at Webb. So that's probably one of the biggest moments that I remember here in Brownsville, Texas.